Hi, I'm Sarah. I am from Johns Hopkins University, and this is my project with Dr. Daniel P. Lathrop from UMD, of course, on the evolution and analysis of river rock shapes. Very exciting. So basically, in summary, rocks evolve by a series of collisions with other rocks, features of the river. They go from jagged, as they've just fallen off whatever cliff they came from, to smooth and rounded. Literature tends to suggest a tendency towards simple spheres, but we thought that that was unsupported by anecdotal observation. And as you can see here, these are some rocks that we found. And if you point out a perfectly spherical one, I will go home. So to do this project, we used 3D scanning software, 3D modeling, and MATLAB code, and found some distinct clumping around the pair and oblate spheroid shapes as we analyzed them, suggesting that those may be the most stable shapes out of the many that rocks can come in. And notably, we did not encounter any spherical rock. A little bit more background. So to this project, we analyzed the shapes through spherical harmonic decomposition, which shows various components of the shapes, a lot like a Fourier transform. And we actually used L equals 0 modes through L equal 3, which is shown right here. So basically, L equals 0 is an average radius measurement. L equal 1 is just shift and at the origin. L equal 2 gives oblate spheroids and prolate spheroids. And L equal 3 gives you pear shapes. This equation here is what I coded in MATLAB basically to run through every rock I had and sort of graph those results. L equals 0 for L equals 3. So shape evolution, as I've already said, is based really heavily on how likely existing features of the rock are to get knocked against other stuff. So from this, we came up with a few evolutionary ideas, one of which is that corners will go first. They protrude, they knock against other stuff, they're not corners anymore. The average radius also can only shrink. You're not adding any material to the rocks as they're getting knocked about. The rock can also split in half at some points. Maybe it gets a little bit too oblong and it hits something in the center, and this may restart some of the process. This is one of the rocks that we studied. You can see it's got a high L equal 3, that last big blue point up there, which means that it's rather pear-shaped. It's also got a relatively high L equal 2, which means that it's mostly rounded as well. So in order to do this, I gathered rocks from the Northwest branch, which is like 10 minutes from here, scanned them using a phone camera and a 3D scanning app, fixed up any imperfections in a program called Mesh Mixer, and then imported it into analysis, and then coded, and then debugged a lot more. So patterns started to arise in the shapes. As I mentioned before, there's clumping and clustering around oblate spheroid and pear-shaped rocks. This is a graph showing all of the rocks that I picked. The axes, S2 over S0 is basically the L equal 2 mode relative to the average radius, or L equal 0 mode. S3 over S0 is that same thing, but with L equal 3. So you're going to have at high points on the vertical axis, those become more oblong or pear-shaped. Low points near 2-ish, between 1 and 2 on the horizontal are going to be oblate spheroids and prolate spheroids. And then that rock is this, which, as you can see, is angular, which is why it's called that. This was picked because it had really barely started the evolutionary process, so to speak, in terms of shapes. So it was a good contrast. The second graph just shows the first, but a little bit more visually. because these rocks tend to evolve towards either a sphere or an oblate spheroid, and then don't go much further than that, is what we noticed. So we also analyzed the local curvature of just the angular rock and also one of the oblate spheroids. Not this one specifically, but this is a pretty good example. That's just a measure of how far protruding points are. So how corner E points are, or how big of a dent it is. So as you can see, this angular rock has a lot more points of high and low curvature and a much wider distribution than the one that's closer to a sphere, which would make sense because it's angular and it has a lot of corners. So basically, at the end of this, we came up with a few evolutionary hypotheses. Spheres are, it seems, unnecessary, similar to in biological evolution. When you become good enough to survive, you don't tend to change a whole lot more. Spheres are a little bit more effort than they're worth, it seems. So maybe rocks become stable in shape enough to not lose a whole lot more mass, and they never reach true circularity, which is depicted on this graph here, which is from other literature. Future research would involve developing a simulation for this evolution process with the angular rock that I've picked up several times, and using this simulation to evolve it through collisions and specifically target high curvature points, as that would, we think, be the most realistic to what would actually happen, and then compare it with the natural rock shape data. So yeah, I guess we can conclude that it seems river rocks, similar to cows, are not spherical. I'd of course also like to thank my mentor and Dr. Lathrop and other people in the lab for helping me out with questions. Any questions that you guys have?